is Marisol Amaya Marquez, and they will be presenting on their work, The Distinctiveness Between Flower Options and the Perception of Loss Affect Decision-Making of Honeybees in Learning and Reversal Learning.
Thank you very much for attending this talk, and thanks to the organizers of BCON, also to my university, Universidad Nacional de Colombia, for the opportunity to share the results of this study. Flower fidelity is one of an important behavior, particularly in the honeybee. It has been called crop attachment or floral constancy, and it is known that this phenomenon is known since the Greeks. Rather than being an innate conduct, this specialized behavior to exploit one type of flower species is a process that requires cognition because it's contingent to the availability of flowers in the landscape. So that cognition, both the basic Pavlovian learning, in which the bee learns to associate a conditioning stimulus, for example, color, with the presence of nectar reward in the flower. But also what looks like a simple behavior rests on a choice. And a choice is a decision-making that is a very challenging cognitive process, even for humans. So we were interested to investigate, to explore, how do foreigner honeybees deal with floral choices in a changing floral landscape when everything is changing? The flowers bloom at this time and then everything changed. So we did the questions on if does the degree of flower distinctiveness affect accuracy in floral choice, and do foreigner honeybees perceive differently loss from gains. We use we conduct a series of experiments controlling for 3 factors: color distance, reward difference between flowers, and we tested whether the perception of the bees, perception of increasing reward or decreasing the nectar production affected choices and decision-making in the honeybee. We did that in 2 phases to focus. One was initial colored learning, and the second one was reversal colored learning. We used the RR index as a rate of adaptation to measure how well a bee is doing when things switch, when the color was switched and conditions changed. We wanted to know how well it did compare what the individual bee has made before at initial color learning. Based on that, we conducted 8 experiments at 2 different color options. We always use white and blue flowers. Those were similar, as you can see in the left, and in the right, more distinct, more easy to distinguish from the bees. The study was conducted with free-flying bees that were marked with pain in the abdomen, and we used artificial flower patches as it allows us to control several variables that might affect economic choices in bees, such as flower density, handling time of the flower. So we did this. We used the same morphology, same nectary, and at that point, only reward quality differences were leading or driving the behavior of the bees. So at the total, we have the 16 experiments, and we study floral choices in 3 times that we call here treatment 1, when both colors, blue and white, have the same reward. Then we make one of those colors greater than the other. And treatment 3, when we switch the color, and that works as a test for reversal learning, as a control of what the bees have learned at initial learning. we measure in the hexagon model of vision in bees if similar colors it was reflected in shorter units, and more distinct colors have larger units in the hexagon. We measure reflectance of those flowers and model those colors to measure distances. What we found was that the main factors driving flower choice in the honeybees were treatment and color. Also, as you can see in the results, several interactions were significant, affecting how bees made the economic choices. And initial learning performance, we focus on floral constancy, flower fidelity, as a measure of accuracy in learning. And we can see in this graph that the diamonds that are close to the middle line, that near the 50%, indicates that bees started on a baseline of behavior that was random choice respect to color. But as soon as we changed and made one of those colors greater, either blue that are the squares in the upper part or white that are the triangles at the lower part, this departure and heavily biased to the color offering the greater reward. We can see here that when the difference in reward quality between options was low, 10%, accuracy was lower than when the deltas increased. Also, another pattern that was seen in all the bees, 320 bees, was that when the bees experienced a loss in nectar production, they were more accurate in learning. They made less errors, and this worked for white and for blue colors. This was in the case of the experiments with distinct, more apart colors. And here, when the bees were tested with similar colors, the performance was even lower at 10%. Bees just reached 70% of correct choices. Something that calls my attention here, or our attention here, is that we did this with different groups of experimental bees. And we can see that in these difficult conditions, when bees cannot distinguish easily, if the difference in rewards increased to 30% or 40% between them, bees just made the effort, the sensorial effort, to make the economic choice. And this reflects a kind of plasticity and adaptation, not just in reversal learning, but at initial learning. At reversal learning, we see that there were costs in readapting, in switching and preferring the color offering the higher reward, and those values reflect values less than 1. Only one scenario of Y being bigger than blue, that particular group of bees at a difference of 10, the smaller one, performance be better. And this was when we conducted the experiments with more distinct colors. But when we did it with similar colors, was kind of surprisingly that most bees tested in those similar colors were performing better at reversal learning when things have changed than when they have learned initial color. And this is kind of mysterious because it occurs only when white contained the higher reward. Previous studies, as we know, have shown that flower fidelity based on learning, and they are able to make economic choices. But one thing that we ask here is, even for a human being to make a correct economic choice, we need to distinguish first, to compare and rank those options, to respond and choose the one that maximizes gains. And here we see that to do that task that is central to cognition, decision making is central. This has to imply cognitive processes further than the initial Pavlovian association between color and reward, and it needs to be tested in a paradigm of successive differential conditioning, in which the bee, like visiting a marketplace, floral marketplace, need to know each product is cues and what they are providing in return. From the behavioral ecology models, we have the diet model, and based on that, and in the way we did this study, the difference in reward can tell us which color was offering the higher net intake rate to the bees in a trajectory of farrowing. And that model, revised in Stephen and Krebs, predicts that bees should behave following a function, 0-1 function, which means that bees should ignore what is producing a less reward and specialize complete flower fidelity to the color offering the greater reward. And in our study, we used the artificial flowers offering a short, limited market with only 2 options that in all the 16 experiments would be categorized with the qualitative categories of this flower is greater, this color, and this is producing lesser. And from that point, we should expect that in all the experiments, different groups of bees, they would get a flower fidelity to the top, specialized completely. But that was not the case. We found differential values in response, of differential accuracy in learning the color, which means or points out that bees are really quantitatively measuring what the difference that are occurring there. And more important, they are using that quantitative information to modulate the degree of attention they are paying to learn, to involve in that task. Also, color distinctiveness between flowers option was a significant factor, and from the literature we know that bees cannot learn that color, the distance that I showed you in the hexagon model, if they are not training under an appetitive, aversive, differential conditioning, meaning that if the bees make errors in choosing the correct flower, they receive a punishment, either electrical shock, quinina in the nectar, water, or empty flowers that is very aversive. In our studies, we found that bees were able to learn under an appetitive conditioning, differential conditioning, which is interesting. Why? Because even if the bee makes the error, the economic error of not choosing the best flower, still they are receiving a reward. And what we found is that in all the cases, bees were able to learn to the departure of a random choice and specialize at some degree on the flower containing the greater reward. This means that bees are responding to the cost of the choice, to the opportunity cost in economy, to the opportunity cost. At reversal learning, our results suggest that it's not only the distance using the hexagon, but also might be the position of the colors in that model, what is affecting other contingent variables to distinguish colors, such as contrast, perceptual asymmetries, or color biases. I still don't know. So this raises new questions on how those different colors and positions in the model affect color learning flexibility. This is very interesting because the direction of reward, this result showed that bees were responding strongly to losses in nectar production than they did to gains of the same amount of reward. So the absolute value was not here the important thing, but the direction in what this was happening. And this aversion to loss was described in prospect theory. We know before from the animal kingdom, particularly in humans, about the negative contrast effect. It is we refuse to receive less than we have received before in animal rats in the laboratory, or even bees. Rats refuse to receive food of less quality. Bees in the paradigm of proboscis extension reflex don't respond with the reflex when the sugar concentration is diminishing. And even Bitterman and Kubilun and Bitterman explain that phenomenon from the sensorial point of view, where sugar sensors saturate and bees do not respond. And also it has been demonstrated that negative contrast effects is stimulus dependent. Also, there are studies with wasp also and bees that prior expectations affect future perception. It's not just the absolute value, but what is perceived. In our study, it's clear that bees were exhibiting loss aversion in decision making, and that is important. As a conclusion, foreign honeybees use information from different nexus when making floral decisions. Those were physical, at sensorial level, how easily is distinguished, both in primary floral traits, that is the concentration of nectar, and at secondary floral traits, it is how color is, salience of color, how easy is to tell apart between two colors. Also, they are using economic aspects, cost aversion. Thank you. Thanks. This is the team that collaborate. Thank you so much.